Hey everybody, how are you? I hope that you're doing well and that we are ready to do this Lightroom tutorial, this follow-along Lightroom tutorial of how to fix a portrait in this amazing software. Hi everybody, I am Giselle Behrens and this is Photo TV NYC, directly from New York City every day at noon in English and at 3 p.m. in Spanish. Please do remember to subscribe if you do feel that you learned something. We are going to be doing some really cool tips and tricks, so I do recommend you guys to follow along. Please do remember to like, and the first thing that I am going to tell you is that you can download the same photo on the below description on the link. So the best way to see this is that you have this tutorial on your computer on one side of the screen, and then on the other side of the screen you can start following along with Lightroom. So I found this photo on Unsplash.com. They offer amazing free photos for use, so we thank Create a Brand. That was the account that shared this photo. I thought that it was such an awesome photo, so thank you for that. Now, for purposes of this tutorial, we will be adjusting it to make it look more enhanced. So what we're going to be doing, our main objective is to make a little bit darker all of the background. So all this area, we want to darken up so she can just pop out. So we want her to pop out of this photo and just have her be the main focal point of the photo, which she already is, but we want her to have that dimensional feel. So on your develop module, this tutorial is for photographers that are already a little bit familiar with Lightroom, but if you're not, you can still follow along and download the photo. You can download a free trial of Lightroom and follow along as well. So I'm going to start over here with my exposure, because the exposure is the first thing that I can observe that is way blown out. So I feel that it's very, very white over here, and even though it was the intention of the photographer, as I mentioned, for purposes of this tutorial, we will be darkening her up and making her stand out. So I'm going to lower my exposure slider slightly, and I'm going to take it to around 30, because I don't want all of the image to go too dark. What I am going to do is that I'm going to add contrast around there. We want to make the blacks rich, but we don't want to go too black, because then they start becoming too contrasty, the highlights are going to become completely blown out. So I think I'm going to leave it in +12. Now, the super duper important part for this particular photo is that we want to recover our highlights. So this is one of the most important parts of this photo in particular, because I want to recover some details over here. I want to see more her skin, and especially as well here on her arm. So what we're going to use is that we're going to go to highlights, and we're going to do a negative highlight. And I just want you to push all the way to the left and see how it looks. The great thing about Lightroom is that you do have flexibility to just take a look at the adjustments, have some fun, play around with them. This way you're going to be more familiarized with each adjustment and what it does. So I'm going to reset it down just by pressing double click on the word highlight, and now slowly just reducing it, and you can see just by adding -43 on the highlights how the photo becomes to be denser and richer and more interesting, in the sense that it becomes more dimensional. So I'm going to reset highlights so you guys can see the before and the after. I don't want to go too dark on the highlights either, because I want them to play with the dark areas as well. So on my shadows, I'm going to also reduce the shadows a little bit, because the photo was a little bit too illuminated. So I'm just going to I'm going to leave it in -9. We want to do subtle adjustments because these subtle adjustments are going to add up to give that effect that we're looking for of separation between the subject and the background. That's really the secret into making a very, like, poppy is not the word, but it's like an intense portrait. So if you're looking for an intense portrait and just making her look good and stand out, that's the secret to doing it. So we're going to do a little trick here. I am zoomed it at 2:1, so I'm going to go back to 1:1 over here. And what I like to do is that with my clarity is going to add sharpness, but when we're working with portraits, we want to be careful with sharpness because sharpness can actually affect the lines and the fine lines that you have on the faces of your subjects, of your models. So in this case, we're going to do a negative clarity, and negative clarity is going to soften up the image, but we don't want to soften it too much either. So all of our adjustments are going to be subtle. So I want you to take a look at the screen, and slowly I'm just going to do -10 clarity. So if I go back to my zoom of 2:1, I'm going to reset my clarity, and you can see how her face starts looking a little bit softer. I'm going to do it again. Command Z. It even lightens up a little bit all of the dark areas that she has over here in a very, very natural way because they are really nice. You want to keep these areas. You just want to enhance them just a little bit. So going back 1:1, this is how she's looking right now. I want to add some vibrance just to make it a little bit more, so she can have more color on her skin, on her face, and all around as well. And I'm going to augment it to +26. Now that we've adjusted the colors and the exposure, I do notice that we can adjust as well the white balance. So I'm going to go up again in my basic module and go to the white temperature, and I'm going to add a little bit of magenta because I feel that this image is a little bit too green. It has like a green tint to it. So I'm just going to add just a little bit, and I think that +9 is good. And now I do also see that it has a little bit of cyan or blue, so it's a little bit too cool for me. I'm going to add some warmth just by augmenting and sliding my white balance to the right. I want you to take a look at the image and see how yellow it became, and I only added 5 points of white balance. So we're really talking subtle adjustments, especially because this photo is a JPEG that I downloaded. So if you've seen my past tutorials, I always recommend, if you have the capability of taking photos with RAW, to do so with RAW. There's a different tutorial that I'm going to do just to explain and compare differences between JPEG and RAW. But basically, JPEG is going to deteriorate quicker because the pixels are already compressed. Rather than if you are adjusting a RAW, you have much more flexibility and more information in your photo. So I'm going to leave it in +3. It's a very subtle adjustment. We can anytime take a look at our before and after just by pressing the / key. So I'm going to go ahead, press my / key, and check out. Of course, this was my, let me go to this one. This is the final one. Okay, so this is my before photo. As you can see, let's check where we are right now. We're really trying to bring out the colors, bring out the vibrancy. And now let's set this background backwards by darkening it up, because our eye naturally looks for any lightness in the photo. So anywhere that there's more light, that there's more luminosity, your eye is going to gravitate naturally towards it. So that's the first thing that your eye is going to see. So I'm going to go negative on my post-cropping vignetting under the effects tab, and only by adding this adjustment I put -41 with the vignetting, and for the midpoint just closes up the circle that you have over here. So it's like a circle that it's doing, but you can make it smaller or make it way bigger as well. But we're going to do a smaller one, a tighter one, because we want the focus to go to her face. So I'm going to create a virtual copy that is with Command apostrophe, and this virtual copy, I'm just going to reset it down so we can see the before and after. As I am live, it does take a little bit of my vintage computer to show you guys the before and after with a backslash. So I just want to go and check my before. This is how we were originally. This is our starting point. It was very highlighted. It's a very light and a high key photo. And right now we're just taking a step back, reducing some of those highlights just to make her stand out of the background. Now that we're here, I'm going to close my effects tab and I'm going to press my M. Now M is going to take you to your masks. And in mask, I'm going to make sure that all of my effects are zeroed down by double-clicking on the word effect, and I'm going to add dehaze. So dehaze is going to add you contrast and saturation. So I'm going to add around 20 of dehaze, but I'm going to make sure that the dehaze does not touch our subject's face, because or else it's going to start becoming too contrasty and we're going to lose our blacks and our highlights. So with the dehaze, I'm going to go and do a linear mask and just bring it all the way from the corner of our top right towards our subject. And we want a very nice and fluffy mask. We don't want it to be too strong when we do the transition, and by that I mean that we want our mask to be open over here, and over here. So we want nice and big space so the transition of the effect is nice and fluffy. So let's just see how this is looking. If I reset my dehaze, you can see that it starts darkening up the photo, as well as adding a little bit of saturation. I'm going to do a second mask on this area, like this, and now I'm going to do a third mask on my upper left with the same adjustments. You can see that as you're creating masks, the adjustments stay, but I do want to make sure to leave a little bit of light on this area because I want the light to come from somewhere. So I'm going to leave this a little bit open on the top, just a tiny bit, while it's still already vignetted, so it doesn't look too obvious. So if we see our masks, we have one here on the top right, one on the bottom right, and one on our top left. So I'm going to press M again and check our before and our after. There's one more thing that I want to do. Now that if you take a look at the histogram, we can see that the highlights, I think, just went a little bit too dark after the adjustments that we did. So we're just going to go to basic, recover some of these highlights, and I'm actually just being guided by our histogram over here. I want them to reach around this area, so then the highlights are not too gray. So I'm going to leave them in -17. Take a look at our before and our after, and here is our finished image. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and more importantly as well, you had fun and that you learned something. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and do them on our live chat, or if you're watching the recorded version, you can just leave a comment below and we'll get back to you. I'm super excited to have more Tuesdays, which means more Lightroom tutorials for everybody. So go ahead and click that subscribe button if you want to follow along every Tuesday with Lightroom tutorials. Bye guys, continue taking photos, and thanks for watching.